What's up, guys? I want to show another example. Look at this sandbox on CodeHS. I started yesterday making the game 2048. If you guys have never seen that before, or if you don't remember because it was popular a couple years ago, it's this game where you have numbers in a grid, and if you move them in a direction, they will combine 4s to make 8s, 8s to make 16s. Just trying to show an example of that. There you go. And so on. And the goal is to get 2048 while never running out of empty spots. Every time you move, you get a new block. 90% of the time it's a 2, 10% of the time it's a 4. So we can make that in our simple text-based Python with a couple changes. Obviously, we don't have the color right now. We will get that. And actually, the worst part is we don't have the live input of the keyboard. Like, if you hit up, it's not going to register that until you put an input and press enter, But we'll work on that later. For 2048, it's kind of complicated. So what I did is I made separate little files. The first one, the easy parts, which is what I called it, easy parts. And you have sort of like function names. And my main loop here says we're going to create the board. Every turn we're going to show it, move, shift, see if we lose, see if we win, and then add a random number. And I haven't actually made those functions yet. But when you do your main loop like this, it's almost like doing comments. If you just give the function a good name that shows what it's going to do, then it's almost like just making comments, So I did the super easy ones, like check to see if you lose. Well, if there are no blanks, you lose. Check to see if you win. If there's a 2048 anywhere in there, you win. Okay. Getting a move, I told them to put WASD and then hit enter, which is not great, but it's fine. Making the board, we do 4x4, full of zeros. And if I hit run, I think you'll see that. And then it asks, but it doesn't actually do anything. This is just getting all the easy parts in there, showing that it's possible, and getting something going. So then I made one called medium parts, which is filling in a little bit more. Not quite the worst function yet, but the one that takes a little bit more thought, which is every move we need to put in a random new guy. So we start off with 2 2s, that's just the rule. And then every time we put in a random 2, or maybe 10% of the time, a 4. So if we run that, we see we start with 2 random 2s, and every time I move, even though they're not actually moving, I haven't done that part yet, it's still going through the rest of the cycle and adding a random 2, or every once in a while, a 4. So that's pretty good, right? You can see that I'm procrastinating on the hard part, right? The hard part is if you push left, everything moves left until it hits a wall or until it hits a different number. And if it hits the same number, it combines. That's going to take a little bit of thought. But I'm doing everything else around it. And I'm keeping an eye out for ways to make it easy on myself in the future. If I realize, oh, wait, this isn't going to work for when I do the hard part, I might change something. And by separating into these functions, I can change them later. So the add number thing, I made it where it looks through all the empty spots and then picks a random one from the empty spots. But then I Googled, like, oh, make 2048 in Python, and I saw what other people did, which is to just randomly pick one, and if it was taken, do that again with a while loop. And that's probably easier, I don't know, it has the same result and it doesn't actually matter. But if I decide to change this, the inside of this function doesn't affect any of my other functions. They don't know what's happening in here. They just know that it's doing its job, you know? So that modular type of setup is nice. The main loop is exactly the same. And so now we got to do the hard part, which is start to shift the board when you say left, right, up, or down. And what I realized, I looked up what somebody else did. I'm not going to do what they did because A, I feel like that's cheating, and B, I don't really like it. I think it's kind of ugly. But I want to just see what's out there, you know? But what they said is one tip that I thought was really nice, which is that the hard part, you only want to do that once. Like shifting the board and making the stuff move over, stopping at a certain part, combining sometimes, all that is really hard. So if we wrote code for doing that left, doing that up, doing that right, doing that down, it would be really painful. And instead, we want to just do it one direction and then use that 4 times. So like, I think I'm going to write how to make it shift left. And then for everything else, I'll just rotate the board. Or if I was a math guy, I would call it a matrix. So you rotate it 90 degrees, do the thing, and then rotate it back the other way 90 degrees, and it will have the process that you wanted instead of figuring out how to do it left, how to do it up, how to do it down, all that. So I didn't like the way they did it, and I Googled like how to rotate a matrix, and there was a really cool thing from a post 13 years ago, and it didn't work. When I tried this, it was a really beautiful line that took some parts, reversed them, took some parts. And this function zip is like if you take 2 lists or tuples or whatever, and then you sort of like boom, 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 match like a zipper part for part. It almost worked, but then I realized that was a list of tuples instead of a list of lists. This example shows a list of lists, but maybe that was Python 2 and this is Python 3. I don't know what. So I added a line in mind to change that, even though it's kind of ugly. If I find a cooler way, I'll replace it. So now we still haven't done the hard part. I still am like procrastinating, putting it off, but I have the entire rest of the game. I have everything in 2048 except shifting them, and now I've made it way easier on myself, which is I only have to do one direction instead of 4. And once I do that, which is the next step, plug it in, bada bing, bada boom, and I'll have something. We'll probably have some errors and I can fix them, but I'll have something that's really close. Whereas if I started off doing the hard part, I wouldn't really know where to put it or what I would need or what was going to be like set up for it. Whereas now I know everything, and now I can just do the hard part next, which is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to look at how these guys do it, but I don't really love their setup, and I'll make my own version that has a nice way of making sense to me. And that's the idea. You probably shouldn't make 2048 because it's a little too much, unless you've just been doing matrices in math class and that kind of thing is fresh in your mind. But the idea I wanted to show is that, hey, you start with the easy stuff, add a little bit more, and then I'm going to put a cherry on top with 1 or 2 functions to do the hard part. And if you have your game and you're moving in that direction, that's great. You could even change the plan and say, hey, I've got this and I don't actually know how to do this part. I'm going to make a different game that doesn't use the hard part. Or I'm going to look online and see what people did for that one little bit instead of just copying the whole thing, which is no fun. But that's an example I wanted to show, and I'll show the rest when I finish it tomorrow.